Welcome, everybody. Today we're working on Unit 13. The topic for this unit is basically securing a database and looking at user accounts and security access levels to a database. Um, Basically, the way I'm going to teach this unit is I don't have a lot of lecture material. What I have is a tutorial that kind of includes the lecture material. So we're just going to kind of work through the materials, and you should do the same. So I'm going to bring the document up on screen, but as I get rolling on it, I'm going to move it over to screen number 2, so you won't see it as I'm recording, but you can follow along in the document on your own. I do have a video recorded from last year, and there are the PowerPoint slides here that come from our old book, and I was kind of reviewing them earlier. And I don't know how many of you even bothered to ever look at these. But they're pretty informative, but I always felt that they were like so dry. I never wanted to lecture on them. But basically the stuff that we're learning is kind of, detailed here. Um, and the first thing I'm going to tell you is as I, go through the process of teaching how to do this using the MySQL workbench, is that you can do all of this work from a command prompt also, or from writing straight SQL code. Um, and I don't know if a lot of admins really truly do it that way anymore. That was in the old days, that was kind of like the only way we could do it. And we would use the command called grant to grant privileges. And that's still the command in the background that makes this all happen, by the way. This can be a kind of tricky area to work with, because if you are truly the root user or like the super user on the database where you have complete control, you also have complete control over other people's level of control, which typically is pretty locked down for most databases. So usually we'll have, as the way I mentioned it, like what we call like a super user, right? Like the grand guru of the database or something like that. And that person kind of controls how everybody else has access to the database. And why do you lock it down so much? So that people don't screw things up, basically, is really what it comes down to. And this PowerPoint here does talk about a lot of the commands. I get, my complaint for this textbook was basically that when you would look at the slides, it's like, oh, this is great. This is like looking at like, I don't know, a dictionary or something. It doesn't really tell you anything. There's a lot of definitions, but not really a lot of explanations as to what's going on. But these are the kind of commands that we're going to be looking at. And you'll notice, some of the terminology here. So like we'll learn how to create different types of users. We will grant privileges to certain types of users and revoke them from others. And then we'll play with the database and see what kind of happens when you set user levels. All right, before we get to coding though, let's get into the mode here. I'm going to make sure all my stuff is running, which I did not do preemptively today. This is pretty routine for me. For you, it probably is already running, but who knows, right? Maybe you followed my pattern of just turning it on when you need to. And then I'm going to also launch my SQL Workbench here and then get that up and running. Now, as I launch this, I want you guys to notice like this is like the welcome screen, whatever, on this product. And for most of you, you only have one tile here, which is your local instance, right, of MySQL. It shows that there's a root account, and it says localhost 3306, which is the loopback address on this system. And when you log in, it takes you right into the product, and there it is, right? So I'm going to do something weird here. I'm going to close this down, right? I'm going to relaunch the product again. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. But I want to show you that when you have these tiles, that these tiles can be edited, right? So I want you to notice here that if I edit this connection, it brings up this dialog. And I don't know if you even remember doing this at the beginning of class, because we kind of like do an install, we set this screen and then walk away from it and never use it again, pretty much, right? Not since, week 2 or something. But you'll notice here that it has all the connection settings that are important for connecting to our local database, right? So for example, it indicates the name of the connection. You can name that, of course, anything that you want. How you're connecting over TCP/IP, which is the internet, basically. Yeah, even though we're on our own machine, in principle, we're looping back to it. And it indicates the port address, and port 3306, by the way, is the default for MySQL connections. And then you have your username placed in there, which if you control the database, you are the root user. That comes kind of from the Linux world, right? The root user is the super user on a system. And then you may or may have not saved your password. So like if you were smart and you saved your password, you just click the tile and you go in. But if you didn't, then you have to type it in every time, and you should, frankly, you should know what your root password is. And as I say that, I'm kind of thinking to myself, do I know what my root password is, right? I might not actually if you quizzed me on it, but you can always come in here and play with these connections, by the way. Now, once you're in this like dialogue here on this welcome screen, I do want you to notice that there are other connections that I've created here, and they're all accessible from the side panel. What's kind of interesting about this is, for example, I also have a Prometheus database hookup here where I'm also root on that system. But any of you that are web students here will recognize the Prometheus name as our local web server on campus that we connect to upload our web pages. And what most of you don't know is that when you get into your later classes in web, you also get a MySQL database account on the same server. And MySQL Workbench has the capability to connect to that database remotely through this software. So you could be at home, and provided you're on a VPN, I think you have to be on a VPN to do it. You can connect to the database remotely. And you'll notice that here, instead of the host name being localhost, it is instead prometheus.gtc.edu, which is the domain address of our database server on the Prometheus server machine, right? And I'm going to go ahead and actually, test that connection. And of course, it's asking me for the password, which I always forget. So, let me see if I remember it here. I have to look it up in my password manager. That's kind of embarrassing, but it is the reality. It's one of those I should have memorized. Madeline, I'm not sure exactly what you said because I couldn't hear you. It is. And then I have ones where, real frankly, I don't want to store them. And right now I'm looking in my password manager, and of course my system is asking me for a password to see my password manager, which I think is pretty amusing. But I'm checking to see if I have my root password stored here, and thank goodness I do. And then I'm just going to paste it in here. And let's talk about this little login screen here, because you notice there's a little checkbox there that says save password in vault. Think about the scenario here that if I saved it and then I had the software up and running on my machine, and I'm like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom, right? And I got up and walked away, and I forgot to lock my machine. Somebody could conceivably come up, click on the connection tile, get into my database, and with one simple SQL, line of code, drop my whole database structure. Not just one database, but every database on that server with one command. And that's kind of a scary proposition. So if you're a root user or the super user, there's a really, really good reason to never have your password saved, that you should always have to type it in. But I'm going to connect here, right? And it said, okay, you successfully made the connection. And I was just testing the connection, by the way. But if I do want to connect to it, I can connect to it, and you'll notice And I want you to notice what like a real database schema looks like here, where I have all the databases of all my active students listed here, and I can dig into all of them. Why? Because I'm the super user. I'm the root account. I can see all of it. Crazy, right? And you notice I'm like scrolling, 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 scrolling. Yeah. So like when the database server is running databases, it doesn't have to be just one. That's kind of the grand point. And you'll notice here the way that we do this is there'll be a first initial last name of a student. That's kind of our naming convention. Then you do an underscore, and then you'll notice that there'll be uh, individual databases depending on what they're working on here, right? And you'll notice that I do have a bunch of my students, depending on who they're taking class with, that are doing the My Guitar Shop thing on Prometheus, right? Interesting, yeah, because you can do that if you wish, right? I don't teach the database class that way personally, but clearly some of our other instructors do. But you can see these are all our databases. And then, yeah, you can dig in there and, oh my God, you can see all the data, right? So super powerful for sure, right? If you do go back to this screen, the other thing that we're going to play with today is we're going to create accounts. And then once we're in the accounts, we'll create panels for them here, or tiles, if you will. And then you can save that. And you'll notice that I have a bunch of connections here from the last time I taught this class. And sometimes I get ambitious and delete them. And sometimes I keep them and whatever. It doesn't really matter too much. But what I am going to do here today is I'm going to run through the tutorial, like I said, and I had blown away all my databases. So most of the user accounts also went away with it, I believe, and we'll find out in just a second. So for right now, I'm going to log into MySQL Workbench just through the root account. I do have all my work from last week open right now. So I'm going to go through and one by one close all those files. Right. Then I'm going to start a new SQL file, and we are going to put in a use statement. But let's pull up the instructions first. I think that probably would be wise. And yeah, my password manager is over there. I should turn that off before I pull the browser back over. Excuse me. Put that on YouTube. Rand sneeze. Maybe I can ask the AI engine on YouTube to filter that out for me. All right. So if you click into the assignment here on Unit 13, there is a document here, which I do already have open here on the other screen. And we're going to use this kind of as our script for what we're about to do. So I'm going to kind of zoom in here. We are going to be running on one of the databases. I'm not sure which one we're going to attach to at this point. Probably the My Guitar Shop, I think, makes the most sense. I think that's probably what I say in here somewhere. And we're just going to go step by step here. Of course, I'm going to very verbosely explain every step as we go, just to kind of make sure you guys get the whole process of it. But this is something that you could do on your own. And repeat it as many times as you want and experiment with it to your heart's content. There's not really a lot you can hurt here except all of the work you've done so far this semester, but you've turned most of that in already, right? So you should be okay. All right. All right. Now, what I suggest that you do to show to me that you've done this is, as I say at the beginning, take screenshots. And what you might want to do is like actually open this document, right? Enable editing, and then take your screenshots as you go. Now, I think I have this in like outline mode. So let me just test that here. So if I go like this, yeah, I'm in outline mode, but you can break outline mode by just pressing enter twice after a thing, and then you can paste in your screenshots. Right. So I'm going to control Z that for myself, but you guys can do that. And there'll be obvious points where to screenshot and obvious points where not. I just want to see that you did the work ultimately. All right. So step one, launch MySQL Workbench and connect to your local MySQL Server instance using your root account as per normal. Enter your password if not saved, and we already had that whole discussion, right? And I'm just curious, do you guys both have your password saved? No. You type it in every time so you know what it is. Yeah. Good. It's good. Yeah, that it's probably good that you do it that way. It's probably a better habit than not. Right? All right. Now we're going to go to the server menu and explore all the menu items on the server menu and take note of what these tools do. We're going to click in and take a look at them all, but don't change any settings, right? So you don't like change something and say, okay, save, because it could screw up what we're doing, real frankly. So just be mindful of that. All right. So I'm moving the document now to screen number 2, so it's out of the way. I will still use it as my script, and then I'll tell you which step I'm covering. Right now we're on step number 2. So inside here, let's do a use statement first. I don't think that it says to do that, but let's just say use my guitar shop. And I'm just doing that preemptively, by the way, just in case that matters. And run that query just so we're attached. Go ahead and go to the server menu now, and I'm trying to find my mouse. There it is. And I want you to look at all the different things on the server menu, right? So there's server status, client connections, users and privileges, status and system variables, data export, imports, startup, shutdown, server logs, option files, dashboard, performance reports, yada, 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 right? And then notice way at the bottom there, management access settings and reset saved passwords for connection, right? All of those things. And these are not often things that you're playing with when you're writing queries because you really kind of don't have a reason to, right? That's why we haven't really looked at this stuff. Hey, but there's no time like the present to kind of learn the tool a little bit deeper. All right, so let's go ahead and just click on server status and see what that does. All right, well, that brings up a tab. And notice it shows that the server is running, right? And once again, this is a local instance, right? And it's running on port 3306. It tells you the exact version number that you're running. It takes a look at what features are on or off or turned off or not applicable, right? And you notice that we're using basic features here for the most part. Error logs are on, query logs are on. So that's kind of an interesting thought. So you're telling me, or at least this is telling me, that every time I do a query, that it logs the query. Yeah. How do you like that? So like if you have, so think about this. If you have a user say, I didn't mess up the database, right? But the query log says that you put in this query that broke things, So, I mean, things do get tracked, if you will. It shows you where all the stuff is located, where the data is stored, the plugins, all that stuff. And then it also, indicates here this replica thing. So this isn't replicating a different database, or it's not connected to a different database. It's a standalone instance, by the way. They talk about the authentication mechanisms they use here, and this uses a SHA-256. That's how you say it in the industry, basically, which is an encryption level, right? And the authentication in MySQL uses what we call a public key, private key combo. And without getting deep into what that means cryptographically, it basically means that part of the key, in other words, like your password is encrypted, but part of the way that you get into the system is publicly encrypted, and the public part of it is shared, and you have to put the two keys together to basically get in and make it work. What's kind of interesting about this screen, like if this was a heavy production database where we were like using it a lot, I could see on the screen to the right, those are all little dashboards of all the traffic that my database is um, doing right now. And you can tell it's not really doing much. Well, yeah, because I'm not doing anything on it, right? But if I was running queries, these would all, you know, have little indicators and charts on them, right? And if I think about this, if it was a big production database and the big company's running on it, and I got like 100 users all hitting the database, that whole panel on the right would be all lit up. Why is yours all lit up? Yours is better. Okay. That's a really good question. So Madeline's showing me her screen, and hers is all up and running and loaded. And you know what? Maybe it's because, and you know what? Let me just try something here, Madeline. I'm gonna disconnect, reconnect. Let me hit that without running a use statement, and I still have nothing going on here at all. Yeah, so I'm not sure why yours is showing indicators and mine is not, but mine's not indicating anything, so I'm not sure what to say. Like if you guys are seeing status reports here, yeah, more power to you. Uh, for me, I'm not getting anything registering here. Maybe it's just not even making my system move at this point. All right, so that was the server status menu option. Then we can look at client connections. All right, so this is kind of an interesting tab. So like if you did have a bunch of people connecting to your database, this would tell you uh, who's connecting, where they're connecting from, and kind of what they're accessing and doing all at the same time. And you'll notice here that one of the columns we're going to focus on here is this user column, right? And with that one, um, it indicates what user is accessing the system. You'll notice all of my little connections here are, well, root, because I'm the only one using it, right? And when it comes down to it, you can like really focus in on this. And I want you to notice down here at the bottom of the screen, these three buttons, right? There's a, so if somebody's running a query, right, I can kill their query, I can kill their connection, and then I can refresh the panel. I can also click show details and it'll tell me like what is going on with whatever it is they're doing. And that's kind of a boring one. Well, here's one, right, where I can see some sort of a query and I'm not really sure what it's doing, but this is nothing I'm in control of right now. I can refresh all of this stuff and ultimately it's just another tool, right? But you can imagine, and just like have you think about this, um, how long or how many people might connect to a database in like in a big company environment, and you could monitor their activity here. So this is a pretty powerful tab. Another one that we are going to look at is the users and privileges. And I want you just to notice really quickly here how many user accounts are already in there before we even do anything. So the root account appears, right? And then you'll see a bunch of pre-created ones. So for example, MySQL info schema, MySQL session, MySQL sys, and message or MGS user. I'm not sure what that one stands for actually. To me, it said messages, but it's the acronym's not quite right. But those are ones that are already there, and we didn't create them. They just came with the system. Did you guys notice that? Right? That's kind of interesting. Then I have a couple here, and these are the ones that are actually going to be the ones that we are going to play with here today. So what I'm going to do actually, and please don't do this on your system yet, right, is I'm going to delete those accounts, well, so that I can recreate them later. You see how easy it was to delete them. It just says delete. Okay, you're done, and the user's gone and off your system. It's like not like five nag screens, asking you if you're sure and enter a code or something, right? It just does it brute force. And once they're gone, guess what? They're not coming back, right? The interesting thing about these, right? So if I click into the root account, and we're going to go through this again a couple of times, is notice that there are tabs over here. So you get the login name, the type of authentication, what host you're attaching to, the password boxes. We can also put an expiration on the password if we wish. So in other words, I could set it to like 90 days or 180 days or a year or something, and then force people to change their passwords, right? Which is considered good practice. Um, we can set limits on their accounts. So like how many queries, updates, connections, and stuff they can have at the same time. If you set these to 0, it's unlimited, by the way. Here on the administrative roles tab, and we're going to revisit this one, you can see that this account has every box checked, so I can do everything possible on the system. Why? Because it's the root user. We control it, right? And then you can set privileges specific to the schema. So in other words, if I have a user, I can give them access to one database and not another, in different levels to different databases. All right, so that was the users and privileges. There's also status and system variables, right? And so like if you look at some of these things that are going on here, and I'm not sure if there's any good ones to look at, um, and they're looking at how many commands have been issued. Like, for example, how many times have I done a create table? That's all listed here. That's crazy, right? If I created prepared statements, commands that we've created, etc. Right? And you can get in here and it's got all these different levels of detail. And yeah, it gets pretty granular. Um, and, real frankly, you use these tools for very specific reasons. And at the moment, we don't have a lot of reasons, usually to figure out problems for the most part. We can actually, if we wish, and this is kind of interesting, you can export data from a database. So I can, choose a database and then, go through the screens down here, how you want to output your database. You can dump all the data in what we call a raw format. You can export it to a query so that it can be imported somewhere else. And, I think it gets pretty interesting that you can do that. But normally when you export a database, you dump the structure and the data. Sometimes you do one, sometimes you do the other, but that's totally feasible to do, by the way. And of course, if you can export a database, you can import one as well, right? So you might have one on one system, you want to take it to a different system. There you go. That's the process. There is a startup and shutdown tab. Now, you guys have seen me go to my taskbar down here, do the whole task manager thing and stop and start my server from there. But it's also possible to do that from within here. Right now it's running. I could stop the server from here. That would stop the background process, right? Or I can take it offline. Normally, these would not be things that you would do on a low-level user, right? So like only the root would do these actions. And typically, not a lot of reason to do. We can take a look at error logs and regular logs. And right now, error creating log reader, I'm not really sure why that, I don't know if you guys are getting the same errors. Yeah, it could be because maybe we haven't logged anything yet today. That could be. And if you start and stop your server like I do, all your previous logs, I think, get wiped. So be mindful of that because normally databases do not get shut down. Here, there's also an options file, and this gets really granular too. And this is for admins, mind you. So I wouldn't touch or change anything inside here unless they prompt you to do so. If you scroll through, though, you can see that it gets very, very, very granular and detailed and technical. And typically, you don't want to mess with any of it. And it goes into all sorts of things like the logging, for example, in ODB, how things are networked, other advanced settings. And you can tell here, a lot of these are just check boxes, right? And you can turn on and turn off certain features depending on your needs and depending on the kind of authentication mechanisms that you use. And this gets, once again, very, very granular. These are super advanced settings. So generally, I tell people don't mess with them at all, right? Not unless you're instructed to do so. The default settings tend to work for just about everything as it is. There's also this cool dashboard, and this is, I don't know when they added this, but I kind of like this tool. And it shows you, once again, kind of that, how your thing is operating. And you can see none of my indicators are indicating much of anything because I'm not really doing anything at the moment. But if I was running some big queries in the background, these things would spike up. And apparently there's a little bit of incoming traffic and a little bit of outgoing traffic, and it's very, very tiny. My table cache is pretty free. And you can see all the different connections and stuff that we have here. So once again, kind of a nice little screen if you're monitoring a database. There's also performance reports in here, right? So they give you details on what happened and how it happened. You can also set up the schema here. And once again, this is kind of like the simple version of what you saw in the previous one. Normally, we don't mess with this too much. And then here we can go into management access settings, and this is what we were looking at. Now, if you think about this, this is the same exact screen we had at the welcome screen when we edited our connection. So when we say manage server connections, that's what we're basically controlling, is all those tiles that appear on the welcome screen. You can get to them from inside the product as well, right? And notice these are all different connections for all different reasons. I have a couple of things here that I'm tempted to kind of delete. Like, for example, both of these here, I think, are ones I'd probably delete because I think I'm going to end up recreating them. So I'm going to actually just go ahead and do that. I'm just going to delete this one, and I'm going to delete this one. And be mindful that also deletes the tabs on my main screen. I'm not getting rid of the Prometheus one, though, because I want that one, right? And then we also have this last option here at the bottom, which is to reset saved passwords for connection. And I don't want to do that either. Why? Because what's going to happen, I would have to change my password and then make note of it. And I really don't want to go through that rigmarole right now. So this is up and running. I'm leaving it alone. And there we go. All right. So that was step number 2. But now we're going to go to the users and privileges screen, which is step number 3. That says on the user panel on the left, click the root user account, then explore the tabs on the main screen. So we kind of did this already, right? And so we looked at the login setup. We looked at the account limits, which none are set. We looked at the roles, and this is probably one of the more important ones here. And it says, notice that the root user has all the privileges and can basically do anything they want on this server and control any tool related to its operation, including control of all the databases, right? Complete, create, and destroy capabilities, folks. Okay. All right. Now we're on to step number 5, and it says create a new user account by clicking add account. That's down here at the bottom. I don't know if you guys can see where my thing is. Maybe I'll turn on a little highlighter here. Makes my pointer a little easier to see. So I'm going to click on add account, and step number 6, it says on the login tab, create a login name, select standard authorization, and limit host matching should be set to %, which stands for any host or local host. Enter a password and confirm it. And then you want to use a mix of upper, lower numbers, and special symbols are suggested. So whatever you set that password to, write it down, remember it, whatever it takes, put it on a Post-it, stick it to your monitor. Yeah, not a good idea, but remember, this is for educational purposes, not a big deal. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this new user. That's fine for right now because we're just testing things, right? But that's the login name, so you don't want to change that. For authentication type, we're going to choose standard, but I do want you to note that we can use the SHA-256, which is more secure, right? But it requires additional setup, which we really don't want to do or take time on today, or caching SHA-2 password, which would be interacting with the server also. So those are, like if we were running a real production database, we would use higher levels for sure, right? Let's talk about this, and this is kind of an interesting setting here. This %, which in this environment stands for wildcard, right? And when we're connecting to a host machine that runs a database, the % basically means we can connect to any host that we're connected to. So like whatever appears in my schema table, I can connect to it, right? Or whatever database structure this can reach, it'll connect to, right? Otherwise, the other thing that people do is that when they know it's on their local machine, you can also put in its place here, local host, all is one word with no space. That would typically work as well. Relative to creating this account and why we do this, and here's the explanation on it. If I typed in localhost in this box, I would only be able to connect to the database on this machine with this account. If I put in the wildcard, I can connect to the database on this machine from a different machine, provided it allowed the network traffic to reach it. Isn't that kind of interesting? So in other words, I could sit on one of your computers here in the classroom, and if I knew the IP address of my machine and the firewalls allow it, I could log in from your machine to this machine and it would work. That's what any host gives you. If you don't want that, you set that to localhost. We're going to leave it for any host, not a big deal. We're going to type in a password, and I'm going to put in something I know I'm going to remember, upper lowercase. So I'm going to do capital A, lowercase b, c, and then 1, 2, 3, and a £. You guys remember that? Capital A, lowercase b and c, 1, 2, 3, and a £. You guys don't have to know that, but not like you're going to read. Yeah, and it tells me right away, weak password. Thanks. But I'm still going with it, right? I just want to make sure. And hopefully that's enough characters because that's only 7 characters, right? Yeah, that's only 7 characters. We'll see if it allows it. So right now I'm going to go ahead and hit apply down here in the bottom right, right? New password and its confirmation don't match. Okay, so let's try that again. So A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, £. That again. Apparently the first one, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, and a £. Okay. And notice, it took it this time, right? And it says, consider using a password with 8 or more characters, mixed case, blah, 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 blah. All right. The other thing that I think it's interesting that it does, and I don't know if you guys picked up on this, I typed in 7 characters. After it captured it, look how many asterisks are in the password boxes. Like, okay, so here's a standard hack for hackers, right? If you know how many characters are in the password, well, that eliminates a lot of unnecessary guessing of passwords with less characters or more. See the thinking there? So by putting in a whole bunch of asterisks, people really don't know how long the password is, and that's one of the things. Right? Okay, step number 7. We're not going to make any changes on account limits or administrative roles at this time, right? But let's click on schema privileges. And then down here, bottom right corner of that box, add entry. Then click the radio button next to selected schema, the third one. And then from the box, we're going to choose My Guitar Shop. Then we're going to go ahead and click OK. So now notice, now I've added access for the new user to be able to access My Guitar Shop. And now we're moving on to step number 9. And it says in the objects right panel, right? And that would be this panel here, if you're wondering which one. So I'm like circling it right now. That's the panel we're talking about. Select insert, show view, options, then click apply. And this is kind of interesting because I clicked insert, but did you notice that insert's got a couple of sub things called update and delete? So what I'm allowing people to do right now is they can look at data, they can add data, and they can look at a view, but they can't update or delete or execute anything. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and here, click apply. All right, then when I click on this up here in the box now, notice how the boxes are checked. But notice all the different things I can give people the right to do very granularly just on this one particular database. So this would be one of your screenshots here, folks. Step number 9 requires a screenshot. To test the new user account, you need to close your current root connection to the database. And to do that, here's how we do that. We just go to the File menu, if I can get my mouse down here, and just click Close Connection. And then it takes you back to the welcome screen. And then we have a new user that we created. Now, mind you, and this is part of the problem with these connection tabs, right? Remember I deleted some of these, right? Now, which is the one I just created? For you guys, it won't be a problem, but I think I just called my new user, right? And I'm going to go ahead and click on that thing. All right, so actually, let me back up here just a second, because I have these connection tabs, and so your instructions don't tell you to do that. It says, create a new database connection for the new account by clicking the plus. So you want to do that, give it a connection name, and call it testing 1, 2, 3, or whatever. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, just as long as it's unique. All right. Enter a connection name, all right, optional, and the new username you just created. What was the new username I just created? I forgot it already. New user? Yeah, that was it. All right. And then click test connection down here. It'll prompt you for the password, so hopefully I type it right. If you want, you can save it in the password vault if you wish. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to say OK. And if you get a success, okay, we didn't do anything with the database. We just made sure the login works. That's all this is. All right. Click OK. Okay, so your new connection will appear as a tile. right? And notice there it is, testing 1, 2, 3. Isn't that interesting? The ones that I deleted before didn't disappear until I created this one. That's really weird. All right, interesting. All right, take a screenshot of that to show me your new tile. Step number 12. Click the new tile to initiate the connection and enter your password if you didn't save it. So there we are, and we're in there. Notice right away the schema table on the other screen, or on the left side of the screen here. Notice all your other databases are now not visible. We can only see the My Guitar Shop. And if you want, you can go in there, you can expand, you can see your views, you can see your tables, etc. All that stuff is there. Interestingly, didn't we create a bunch of stored procedures last time? Do you notice that I don't have any in there? Why is that? Because I shut my database down. So if I want to recreate those stored procedures, I have to bring up the files, run the code, execute the query, and then after I run it once, then it's in memory and it stays there. So if you never shut your database down and never shut your computer down, those stored procedures and functions will stay, right? Otherwise, they're not in there. They remember they compile, load into memory, and then stay active as long as it's running. All right. So step number 14, let's do a use statement for My Guitar Shop. So we'll zoom in a little bit here. Use My Guitar Shop. Not like it really matters because there's no other databases, but it's a good practice anyhow. Execute the statement. Notice we are connected just fine. All right. We're going to do step number 15, folks, and then we're going to do a 5-minute break. Step number 15 is view the contents of the product table by just doing a really basic select star from product. So select star from products, just like that, the semicolon, and we'll run our query, and there's all of our products. And then I want you to take a screenshot of that, right? And here we will take a break because we're already an hour in. So let's do a 5-minute break. I'm going to pause the recording and we'll resume shortly. All right, we are back from our break and we are going to move on here. We just completed, I'll just bring it back over. We completed step number 15. So that's a screenshot moment, by the way. And if you notice in the document, I did that where I tell you when to screenshot and give you a spot for it. All right, so now we're going to move on to step number 16, which says view the contents of the view called customer info, which is this one here. And then we'll just basically select from that view. So we'll just copy this query here and then we'll just tweak it. So instead of products, we're going to do VW underscore customer info. Like so. And then go ahead and execute it. And you notice how that brings back those results. And so notice that we can select and run a view, right? That was one of the things that we selected. So those are good. Now it says step number 17, attempt to create a new table with one column, name it anything you wish, for example. And I'm just, for the sake of simplicity here, I'm just copying it right from that document, right, that we're working from. And here's the command, create table, whatever. And the column's called testing. It's varchar 20. That's the whole thing. And then I'm going to try to execute it. And here comes the run. And notice the error command. And then notice the error code at the bottom. Error 1142, create command denied to user, new user at localhost for table whatever. Right. I like how that reads, actually. It's kind of snarky. But Yeah, so we didn't give that capability to the user, right? And so step number 18 asks you to answer what happened and did it work? Well, I guess I already answered that for you. Um, and interestingly, right, for 19, it says, what is the error in the console? Take a screenshot of this step and paste it here. One thing I do want to point out, if I'm like, well, you know what, maybe I should give myself permission, right? You, could I go up here to users and privileges and, oh yeah, check it out. The account you're currently using does not have sufficient privileges to view the client connections. So I can't even look at the other accounts, right? The only thing I have access to is the My Guitar Shop database to select and to look at and to run views and do inserts. I think is all of what I have access for. So I can't change my own permissions, by the way. Now it says, now attempt to insert a new record into the categories table. Type the following command, and you can borrow the command and just drop it in, right? So we're just doing insert into categories, and we're dropping it into the category name column, and we're going to name the new category accessories. Right, we're going to go ahead and execute this one. And that one worked, right? So it says what happened in the above step, did it work, and why? Well, what's the why? Well, we gave this user permission to be able to do that. So they're allowed to insert, right? All right, so once again, there's a screenshotable step there, folks. All right, and I guess I kind of blew number 23 already, but if we went to the server tab, go to the users and roles, or users and privileges, actually, is what they call it. So maybe they changed the name of it. And what do you see? And why? Well, I think we already explained that one too, right? This is not a root account. This is not an admin. So I cannot change my privileges for myself. Only users with a higher level of access, the admins or the root users, can do that. All right. All right, so now it says close the connection. So we're going to go to the file menu. This is step number 24. And we're closing the connection. And now we're going back to our root connection and back in where we do have administrative privileges. And notice all the databases appearing back on the side. So you know we're in the root mode again. All right. Step number 25. Create a new database with the name of your choosing. Okay. And I have a sample command. I'm going to create a database called whatever, right? And notice I already have a couple of whatever databases. I have a whatever and a whatever two. So I think I'm going to go with whatever three. All right. So that's my snarky little thing to do here. So I'm going to type create, and let me zoom in a little bit. Create database, whatever. This is going to be called 3. Go ahead, execute that command. And then I'm going to refresh my schema table. There it is, created. It says, make sure to refresh your schema panel. Yep, I just did. Take a screenshot and paste here. So show me the new database that you created. All right, step number 26. It says, create a new user account named new admin and set a password and connect to localhost. All right, so let's do that. So up here under server, we're going to go to users and privileges. We're going to add an account, and I'm going to call this one new admin. We'll still use a standard authentication. This time, let's type localhost here. So in other words, you have to be on this machine in order to make it work. I'm going to use the same password I used before because I really don't want to invent a new one. then I'm going to go ahead and click apply. Really, I know I typed them incorrectly because I did it very slowly, by the way. And I wonder if it's because I'm not reaching 8 characters. I'm just doing 7. That could be why. All right. It says on the administrative roles tab, click the DB manager. So notice here, DB manager, and notice DB manager can grant full rights on all databases. You guys notice what happened when I clicked that one? It also automatically checked DB designer and backup admin as well, automatically. And then also notice on the right hand sidebar, all the different things it can now do. So alter, create, delete, drop, event, blah, blah, blah. You know, just all these different things that I can do now that I could not do before just by clicking that one button. Take a screenshot of this. Show me that you did it. All right, now on to step number 27. So step number 27 says close your connection with the root account. So back up to file, and then we choose close connection. We're back to the main screen. And then they want us to create a new account again. So I'm going to hit the plus mark. And this one, I'm going to call this testing, I don't know, ABC, whatever. Doesn't matter what it's called. This time we're going to use the new username, new admin. We'll test the connection. I'm going to save the password, and then I'm going to click OK. Looks like it worked. I'm going to say OK to that screen. And then you can screenshot the success screen if you want. So you could just do test connection and show me that would work. All right. Go ahead and say OK. And then step number 28, connect using the new tile you just created. So mine is called testing ABC for the admin. And now I'm in. And then here in the schema table, I'm not seeing anything. Are you guys seeing your database in the sidebar? All right, I'm wondering if I mess something up here because I am not seeing anything. Are you guys seeing it? And see what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to, okay, and that's what you should be seeing. So I must have done something wrong here. So I'm actually going to close the connection tab. I'm going to go back to my root here. And I'm wondering if maybe I screwed it up when I created this. So new admin, and I set mine to localhost. Okay, so check it out right here. It never stuck with the DB manager. Um, okay, so let's apply. So maybe I clicked it and never hit apply. That's probably what happened. All right, so now I'm going to close it. Now I'm going to go back and test my connection and okay, there's all the databases, right? Right. So proof that those settings work, I guess, right? All right. Then attempt to delete the table. So we're going to click on the whatever three database that we created, and then we're going to type in the command drop database, whatever you called it. Mine's whatever three, and I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, we might have to do a use statement first. So you know what? Yeah, notice that I put it into the instructions backwards, right? There's the use. Okay, now we're attached. See how it's highlighted. And now we'll drop the database. Did it work? Yeah, it's gone. That's because we do have that capability. All right. The next thing it asks in step number 30, go to the users and role panel, users and privileges, whatever, and delete the new user account. So I'm clicked on the new user account in the left sidebar, and I have a delete button, clicking delete, and notice it says the account new user will be permanently removed. Please confirm. You go ahead and hit delete. And did it work? Yes. You know, and now the question is why or why not? And then the answer becomes if you look here and look at the administrative roles, right? We have this option here, which is the grant option. And the grant option is the one that controls access to the databases and their structure, right? And therefore, we can basically delete that user because we have that capability as a database manager. All right. Next instruction and the last instruction is to close the current connection, go back to the main screen, and your lab is complete, folks. And that's all she wrote. So that's an example of what we can do with this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here, but that completes the lab for